Hey everybody, welcome back. We are super excited to welcome our first guest to the newly rebranded Atalanta podcast. Our mission is to elevate female athletes in the hybrid space, and we can think of nobody better than our guest today, Dr. Stacy Sims, to kick us off. Researcher, author, and scientist, Stacey is the expert on female physiology and training. She's passionate about helping young girls and women understand their unique physiology and to be empowered as active and confident females. So, for so long, if anybody's been following Stacey, you will know that she's explaining and highlighting that science has been guiding women's health and performance, and it's been incomplete or based on male physiology. So she's doing an incredible job to rewrite this. And I could keep going on, but Em told me to keep the introduction short. So I'm going to just hand over and say, welcome to the podcast, Stacey. This is absolutely awesome to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. Time difference. Very excited to be chatting with you guys.
Yeah, no, we're really excited and I've been looking forward to this one. Perfect to kick us off. Before we delve into all things female physiology, training, pick your brains, get all the tips, we first wanted to ask about your Hyrox experience, because a lot of our listeners are Hyrox fans, athletes, Hyrox obsessed. So we know that you competed in Hyrox Auckland. How did you find the race?
There's some context to it. I've been following Hyrox pretty much since it started, but never really had the opportunity to race it or do it. And then when they announced it was coming here to New Zealand, I was like, great, it's only a couple hours away. Already wanting to train for something like this, already have been, I merged away from CrossFit and more into strength stuff. And was really excited about it. I was going to do partners, but then my partner got injured. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing it solo, which is fine. But then I ended up being in the Northern Hemisphere in the deep freeze of the US for a much longer period of time than I thought. And so I didn't have adequate time to train on the sled. So I'm prefacing what's happened. So I go up there and it's blazing hot, which I love. It was fantastically hot. And started, and it was just really cool to see everything's going on. And we get to the sled pole, and I had a hard time with the sled pole not being strong enough posterior chain, which happens when you don't do that kind of training. And so I had to twist instead of stand up and step back. So I loaded my knee. And when we went out the door, so I was loading to the right, and you had to run out the door and up a hill in the Auckland one to the left. And I tore my hamstring and meniscus.
Oh no!
But I didn't realize it because you get in the mode, right? And I heard something in my ear. I was like, oh, that was a weird pop. Reach down, touch, and I don't feel anything. Didn't feel that much pain. So I pull my knee sleeves up and I finish it. But because it's a kind of a hilly course on the downhill parts, I was like, that feels really weird. I feel really unstable, but didn't think about it really. So I finished it much slower than I had anticipated because you can see my results and see where the run suffered. Boom. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah. Wall balls was favorite part, I think, because I trained heavier and higher than what the actual wall balls were. And then finished, and it was great because like my daughter came up, she got to see what it was about. Friends were there, just really cool environment and atmosphere. Heard a lot of people that yelling my name I didn't know because it was just that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I went to go watch my niece finish the wall balls, and I couldn't walk up the stairs. I was like, oh, something's happened. So now it's been how many months? 5 months, and
Yeah.
yesterday is the first day that I could do lunges without pain.
oh no. I mean, yeah, we can vouch there was a hill when you come out of the course, because we were talking about this just the other day and I was like, it had to be one of the worst bits that I was like, oh God, I could, why? The race is hard enough, and it was great. It was an outside lap, but it was very hot, which maybe you loved. We definitely didn't. And then there was the hill. So yeah, not good. But did you enjoy the race format as a
Really?
yeah.
Yeah, it was so fun. And I mean, I come from a individual endurance, long endurance background, and some of my friends who were there, who also come from Ironman and ultra racing and stuff, were like, "Did you do it solo?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "We did too, but we found it really isolating and not that much fun." I was like, "Yeah, this is totally a team thing, a partners thing, because of the vibe that goes with the encouragement, everything you get used to in the gym." I was like, next time I'm doing pairs, definitely. So
There
Melbourne,
will
this,
there'll be a next time. Yeah, okay,
yeah,
amazing.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now unfinished business. I have to do it uninjured.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Yeah.
Um, well, maybe that kind of leads us nicely on to talk a little bit about strength training then for
Yeah,
females.
absolutely.
And you could delve into, I mean, a huge area, but maybe kind of hybrid Hyrox specific strength training alongside running, like
Yeah,
advice for females.
absolutely. So one of the big things that we know are women are quad dominant. And that happens when we hit puberty, where our center of gravity changes, we become more quad dominant, and we don't tend to use our posterior chain as much. So if we're looking about running as well, women tend to hinge from their hips and not really hinge from the ankle so much. So we're looking at the landing and the running mechanics. And if we're not conscious that we have to really develop posterior chain, then we tend to be too far forward and put more stress in the knees and in the hips. So we'll see a lot of soft tissue injuries and joint inflammation, especially as we start getting closer and closer to an event. We see about 3 or 4 weeks out, people are really starting to talk about soft tissue injuries and maybe some joint pain and wondering what's going on. So we have to take a step back and look at the mechanics. And part of that is strength training. What are we doing to really specifically work the posterior chain so that we can then get into these different motions of lunging, of wall balls, of farmer's carry, running with the weights, those kinds of things. So spending a significant amount of time developing posterior chain. So that's, your single leg RDLs, it's your hip thrust, it's hex bar deadlifts. Just really looking at how are we going to develop that into a motion, because we can spend all the time we want developing the strength of a hip thrust or single leg hip thrust or hex bar deadlifts, all of these things. But if we don't transfer it into the motion that we want, then we're still going to be weak in that motion. So an example for that would be like you do a deadlift and hip thrust heavy sets, and then you go right into a sled pull or into a sled push, so that you are really having to work in that motion, so that when you're under load and tired, by the time you get to the sled pull or push, even though it's really close to the first part of the race itself, you're already under stress and fatigue, because you are stressed from the start of the race. You have a run, you have a ski, you have a run, and then you get into the sled work. So you're under that fatigue. You want to be able to be strong in that fatigue and then carry it forward to the rest of the event. So, and we have lots of different sets that we've designed to be short and concise, where a lot of people think with Hyrox you have to have long hour or plus sessions, especially if you're doing a sim. But it's better to be short and specific as you're building up and have specific movements that you want to work through the strength. So one is, like I just said, the hip thrusts and deadlifts into the sled work. Another one would be Bulgarian split squats into your weighted lunges, or we look at doing heavy squats into our wall balls. So you're always taking one of the motions of the event and putting it as a finisher or in combination of the specific strength work that you're doing. It's very time efficient and very specific to the event that you're training up for.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I completely agree with the posterior chain thing. I mean, I know myself that I am so quad dominant, and I really need to work on it. Would you do any activation, like, as well? Would you ever?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and before you run, like, you just, like, obviously just talked about females and they're running, and obviously maybe like activation for the posterior chain before you went for a run or something to try and switch it on to utilize it.
Yeah. One of the, like my daughter plays soccer and she just turned 13. And I'm working with one of the injury prevention guys. And part of it is this whole posterior chain thing. So we've developed a partner a single leg hip thrust where you have the single leg hip thrust and then the alternate leg is pushing against the foot of the other person. So you're pretty much kind of hovering there. So you're really activating, and then you flip and get into a run. So you can do partner workout that way. So you're really activating core to hold yourself up, plus the glutes and the hamstrings.
Yeah.
So you get into a position like that. You could do it against the rig too. Like you're pushing one foot against the rig in a single leg, and then all of that's activated and ready to go in that extended position. So then when you go to run, you're already in that extended position, and boom, out the door you go.
Wow. Yeah. That's cool. I think a lot of now, I mean, looking at the progression of like Hyrox training, a lot of training has gone to, I mean, people talk a lot about volume. I know what you've just said about, and sometimes maybe not so specific on the Hyrox movements and like building strength, building your running, and then closer to the race, starting to look at the competition movements and starting to add them in. Would you say you would build strength with the movements like early on, or would this be like you could have a strength
Yeah.
block and then start to add that specific move like strength into the movements?
Well, most people coming into it have some moratorium of either aerobic fitness or strength. So if we're thinking about making it as seamless as possible, about 12 weeks out, this is where we start the combination of the strength and the movements. And I mean, Hyrox themselves have put out some training programs, and I look at it and like, if somebody follows this program as a woman, they're going to be so overtrained and burnt out within 4 weeks, they're not going to make it because they're not really they're focusing on all the energy systems, which is great, but they're not blocking it. Where we're like, let's work on strength with a movement, or let's work on movement and getting into the full range of movements with lighter weight. So we want to block it. Maybe we start, if we're really strength oriented, we start with strength with the movement right after, like I was describing earlier, so that we get used to getting into a quicker activation and movement. But if we are more run oriented, then we want to work on the full range in the motion, the full range of depth and this wall ball or the lunge, and then start adding weight onto that. Because the whole idea is about injury prevention, especially at the start.
Yeah, and then touching on the female aspect of it, I've like listened to lots of your other podcasts and read various things, and I think people would be interested in females always, I think, find, or not always, but the upper body, and in Hyrox, like the sled pull or the wall balls at the end, just more the shoulders sometimes than actually the squatting of the wall balls. Find that hard, and lots of females aspire to being able to do however many pull-ups. And do you mind talking a little bit about, I've heard before, the kind of distribution of weight with females and why females often find the pull-ups so much harder than the males. You know, you go to the gym and you just see some guys smashing them out and it's super easy and you're like, how is this possible? I train all the time. So maybe delving into that a little bit.
Sure. So we know center of gravity for women is lower. So you are having to pull a bit more of the weight up than men do. Men's center of gravity is closer up to the middle of their chest, and women is more down by the belly button. And we also have to think about shoulder girth and the width of the shoulder girdle itself. So when we're thinking about pull-ups, most people are taught to arms up and then it's a couple of hand widths apart. So you're more shoulder width apart. But for women, going wider. You want to go wider so you can actually activate the lats instead of just the shoulders. And it is a little bit more complicated for women to get really good at pull-ups in general because we tend to have longer arms and torso and our center of gravity is lower. So if we do a lot of eccentric work where we're doing a jumping pull-up and a slow descend, we're going to gain a lot of strength that way and facilitate getting into more pull-ups. But also a lot of eccentric work helps with the wall ball because you're catching and kind of an isometric hold before you throw it again. So if you're strong in that isometric and eccentric work, it makes the wall ball a lot easier.
Yeah, because I think, like, I found personally, like the wall balls, I feel like it's more my shoulders than like my lower body. And I know a lot of people struggle generally just with the mobility as well. And maybe we find that the males actually find it sometimes harder with the mobility and the squat depth than the females. We noticed in the female field that the elite athletes, loads of the females can do the 100 wall balls unbroken, but for the male athletes, actually that seems to be a bit harder, and you don't see it as much. So it is interesting, but I think I've always naturally, wall balls, I thought it's going to be my quads, my glutes, my lower body that tires first, but it's been my shoulders. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing about it is women are more endurant. We're born with more of the oxidative or endurant type fibers. So as a race goes on and the movements get longer, we get better. So you see the wall balls, and a lot of women are getting to 70 to 100 without too much issue compared to the men, is because we're more endurant. So when we're looking at the types of things that are in Hyrox, the strength part, I'm really happy that the really heavy stuff is at the start, because then it's like, okay, let's warm up and potentiate everything. Because then as the race goes and we become more effective in our movements because we're more endurant, then it gets easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? And this is slightly off the Hyrox topic, but staying with like hybrid, and there's a big like surge into running and ultra running and stuff now. And you start to see as competitions get longer, or for example, you look at a 10K, even up to a marathon, and there's never a female that's ever at the top end going to be a male in the marathon at the moment, or in a 10K or 5K. But you look at ultra marathons, ultra cycling distances and stuff like that, and you start to see females are winning not only the female like class, but also like overall, and beating men once it gets that ultra distance. And is that to do the same thing, or just like Hyrox is on a smaller scale?
Yeah, because we're more endurant, but also a psychological aspect where women have a higher pain tolerance. Just by the nature of being XX and some of the behaviors that are driven by neuropeptides, we are able to compartmentalize and be able to go for the long endurance aspect a lot easier than men, which is why you're seeing so much success. And biomechanically, most women are more biomechanically sound for endurance orientated sports rather than the short, sharp kind of sprint type, even up to a marathon. If you look at the ultimate female marathoner versus ultimate male marathoner, their physiques are pretty similar, and their stature, their biomechanics, and everything. It comes down to muscle morphology, where women have more of the endurance and less of the glycolytic. So there's definitely a rationale from a physiological standpoint why women do better in endurance.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting just from like when you look at ultras and start to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
And then
But I don't want to do one. I've done that. I don't want to do
Yeah,
anymore.
whilst we're still on the training side of things, Hyrox and I think running and just fitness in general now seems to be like growing for all ages even more. You're seeing a much more widespread in the elite 15 field for the females. I think the youngest is 20, the oldest is 51, which is incredible. What would you say about the strength training as you're getting older, the importance to I don't know, start it young, or kind of what would your advice be, and how to kind of make it become part of your life as you're getting older, having children, etc.?
It's bedrock for everything. So it doesn't matter how old you are, you should start strength training. And we think about it, we want to think about being muscle centric through our entire life, because if we're thinking about what lean mass is and what muscle is, it's a huge metabolic sink. So it helps with glucose metabolism, insulin resistance that we see across menstrual cycle as well. And then we see a lot of incidences of PCOS that's rising up, and we see an incidence or a greater incidence of insulin resistance with PCOS. And strength training helps with that. As we get older, we become more what we call anabolically resistant to both protein and exercise. So it becomes really important to do strength training at least 3 times a week, preferably compound movements, and working on the lower loads, heavier weights, because we want to really keep some of the contractile proteins firing properly. as we get older, we start to lose some of the signaling to have a really strong and powerful muscle contraction. But if you're lifting heavier loads when you get older, 40s onward, then you're able to maintain that muscle integrity. When you're younger, it doesn't matter. You can mix it up. Just as long as you're doing resistance training and you're paying attention to how you feel and you're progressing with a great plan. But as we get older, we have to be very conscious that we want to do heavier loads and more contrast, French contrast training. So that's your heavy load into plyo work, just to maintain that glycolytic and that fast explosiveness. That's the first thing that goes as you start getting older, in both men and women, but really apparent in women because we're born with less of those fast twitch fibers too. So definitely strength training across the board.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that I think is so cool about Hyrox is it is encouraging more females, maybe female runners that have never touched strength training before, to start strength training. And it's also encouraging people to look at a different challenge instead of just signing up for a run, to maybe sign up for a Hyrox, get into strength training. And then just like you're talking about the like explosive strength and doing some plyometrics, like you need this for Hyrox, especially for things like the burpee board jumps. And like a lot of the training programs are including a lot of plyometrics, which probably wouldn't have been in most people's training plans before Hyrox was around. And with the, I guess, the expansion of the age groups as well, like going up to 70 plus, and we saw like 70 plus athletes competing at the world champs, and it's just incredible. You're thinking maybe it's all, I mean, you must be pretty excited about it because it's everything you've been talking about, but there's somewhere for everyone to focus their training, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get really excited when I get into a massive competition of all these strong women. It's like so exciting. And knowing that I come from that super endurance background where people are like, I'm not touching a weight because it's going to affect my body composition. I'm not going to be able to go as fast. It's like, lift some weights and you will go faster. And you see this in Hyrox. And when you see people coming from a running background, yeah, they struggle on the sled because they think, oh, I can just get in there and maneuver it. And then you see people who come from a strength background, they struggle on the run. So it's like we each have our weaknesses, but at the end of the day, it's all about being strong and powerful. And I don't care what time you finish or if you do individual or partner or a quad, you're out there, you're getting strong, you're getting fit, you're being empowered, and I love it. I mean, kudos to Hyrox for pulling that off.
Yeah, and it's amazing, like you just touched on all the females getting involved, because I think, I'm not sure if it's still the same now, but definitely like last year at the start, the largest category was the women's open doubles category. Like that was the one that sold out the fastest, had the most like participants. And we went to one in London, and we watched like the waves, and it was hours and hours of like
every
female
10 minutes.
It was amazing. We were just like, this is like incredible. It was such a, I don't know, uplifting, empowering thing to see it. It was really cool. So yeah, we love
Sociocultural, like we go to I work from home and I have a full rig and set up in my house, but I rarely work out in my house. I want to go to the gym for the social connection and have a chin wag and that kind of stuff. And the motivation and the empowerment you get from being around people. And that's what you get when you're doing partners and stuff. You're like, yeah, this is great. I can go as hard as I can, and then someone's going to help me. So that's part of the other thing. You really do have that camaraderie. One of the pairs that came up with me are friends of mine. One's a marathon runner and one is more strength oriented. And they met the day of the event. And so my friend Amber, who's a marathon runner, she's like, this is great, let's go. My friend Jules, who's more strength oriented, she's like, I'll take over the sled. But they worked it out and they had a great time. So yeah, it's accessible. So it's fantastic.
It's so cool, isn't it? And then I guess because like we all love Hyrox and we've talked a bit about the training and obviously your background has been changing the narrative behind everybody, just, I mean, you've touched on it, just following the training they can find online, the training philosophies that have been out there for ages, because most of them have been either based on males or created without the female body in mind. What are the
Yep.
biggest things you would say about, I mean, I know you talk a lot about fasted training and things like that, and the difference between females and males, and there must be a bunch of others that are like the highlights that maybe females might want to take note of. And I mean, you can just give a quick, you don't have to go into depth on all of them, but yeah, I know there's so many, but anything that's like that highlights that maybe people could look into a bit more or do a bit more research with everything you've got out there, and follow it up following the podcast.
I think the biggest thing, especially for hybrid athletes, is eating enough. Because you think about the volume and the intensity, and most women will eat and be full before they've actually eaten enough. So we know that over 50% of recreational female athletes are in a subclinical low energy availability state. So what does that mean? It means you're not eating enough to adapt and remain uninjured. So that's the critical thing. It's like finding eating opportunities, and at every eating opportunity, you're having some fiber and some protein, help with your gut microbiome, and also help with muscle and bone development. It really kind of knocks at any kind of soft tissue injury on the head, because you're so predisposed to having soft tissue injuries when you're doing the high intensity anaerobic work with the heavy strength work, because there are different muscle systems with regards to fueling, but also the different pulls on the muscle itself, from getting into a steady state, higher tempo run into a sled push pull. Those are all very muscularly demanding and central nervous system demanding. So eating enough is something that's, I cannot express the importance of eating enough. And a lot of people don't realize that they're not eating enough. So I want to push that. Let's be
Yeah.
happy that we can eat, and we don't need to be put in this little box where we're not supposed to eat because we're supposed to be these demure little women who decided that we want to do this event. It's like, no, eat. It's good. Food is good, and we need it. That is one of the biggest things. And this is where all the diet trends of like fasted training, or following a certain, like the carnivore or any of the other diet trends, comes into play, where you really want to be an individual and look at what are the demands of your life, because life stress is definitely a stress that comes into play. We think about women who are working, who have kids, partners, and all of the life stress of keeping a household together, as well as trying to train and be competitive. That life stress adds calorie needs, and it also adds onto the central nervous system stress. The other thing that a lot of women don't do enough is rest and take recovery days, especially if we're looking at hybrid athletes. Like, oh, I ran yesterday. Today I'm going to do strength training. Yeah. Okay. How do you feel? Well, I feel a little bit flat. Then why are you going to do strength training? Like, you're not going to actually get to the loads that you need to stimulate adaptation. Maybe you need a rest day. If we don't rest, then we don't adapt, because the stress of exercise needs to be overcome through recovery. And that's how we get fitter. We don't get fitter in the act of exercise itself. So if I could get every woman who's listening to this, plus everyone who's outside of listening to this, to eat more and recover better, then we would see an influx of really happy, powerful, uninjured athletes.
Yeah, I mean, amen to that. Like, I think, yeah, we absolutely agree, and it's such an important message to get across. And I think sometimes with the likes of social media nowadays, and as much as Hyrox is an incredible sport for the female side, maybe a lot of it is, oh well, I want to wear shorts and a sports bra and also look great, and that can have a negative effect on, I'm gonna train hard, not fuel my body enough, but I'll feel like I look good on the start line, like, which is not good for longevity and injury prevention. Yeah, like, it's
The allosteric load of life is something that a lot of older women forget about. I mean, that was one of the precedences of my injury. One, not having enough time to train properly for the sled, but also coming in severely jet lagged, a lot of emotional stress from unexpected death in the family at Christmas. So coming in and going, yeah, I'm fine. and then not being fine because it was just the extra stress. So that's the other thing where it's like you really need to have a look and take those recovery days to prevent injury, even if you're like, I'm really stressed and exercise is my stress reliever. Finding a way to have other ways to mitigate stress is something else that really does help go far in injury prevention.
Yeah, I think it's so true, and I think a lot of the time everyone's looking for the big fix or the most interesting thing they can do or the next you know I don't know exciting thing they can add in, but actually just going back to eating enough and resting. And I guess
Yeah.
most people, I think it's so interesting that you highlight the fact that the time you do adapt, and I mean, as PTs and coaches, like working with people, it is really hard to get people to take a break. And everyone's a quite type A personality where they want to keep going, and they think if they're resting they're not doing as well as
Gaining.
everyone else and gaining. And it's trying to get through like that's the only time you're going to get stronger, is if you can rest and allow your body to repair, reset, and then we can go again. And I just wanted to link to there's an elite 15 athlete called Sika Arning. I was talking to her yesterday, and she's just started a page where she's trying to gain, I guess, give females the information about the red S, energy relative
Efficiency in sport.
energy deficiency in sport. And she's had a couple of big elite 15 races now where she's got to the wall balls, and well, she's either collapsed during the race or she's got to the wall balls and she's nearly collapsed, so she's finished the race and collapsed over the finish line, and it's come back and she's found out she's obviously suffering with this red S, and she wants to raise awareness. And I think it's incredible that
Great.
an athlete is doing that. Just for anyone that might have looked into, like, I mean, following Sika, like, could you give us a bit of a rundown on red S and females and anything you think might help there? I just think it's really cool that she's sharing the information. It'd be cool to give a bit more information
Yeah.
from an expert.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research into relative energy deficiency in sport. It starts with low energy availability. So we see, like I was saying, that you need to eat enough and you have to make sure that you're eating in and around your training. Because if we are not fueling enough and we're not eating in and around our training, then our brain perceives us as being in a food scarcity state. So we start seeing a downturn of all of the systems of our body. You might initially start seeing some disruption in your menstrual cycle. It might get longer, or the bleed pattern changes. It goes from your normal pattern of 5 to 7 days, and then it goes down to maybe 2 or 3 days. That means you have more of an anovulatory cycle. Most women don't realize that even if you don't ovulate, you will still bleed, but watching your bleed pattern is really important. So that's the first sign that your body's under too much stress and load. We see a lot of metabolic disturbance where you get a blood test and your blood lipids come back, and your physician will say, oh my gosh, your cholesterol is suddenly high, your low density lipoproteins or your bad cholesterol is elevated. You might come back with a misstep in your CK, and people are blaming it on creatine, but actually it is part of a warning sign that you're in a low energy heading to relative energy deficiency in sport. So it's a full body system shutdown is what's happening. And the more you're trying to train and improve performance, and that athletic mentality comes over of, oh, I'm having a bad day, I'm overly tired, and you keep pushing and you're still not eating and you're not resting, then you get into a full-blown syndrome, which takes years to come back from. So when I talk about trying to eat more and stay on top of things, get your rest and recovery, it's really to stop the first step into that of low energy availability. We used to call it overtraining syndrome, but now we're seeing it's more low energy and under recovery is what's promoting a lot of the symptomology. And within the low energy, we see that low carbohydrate intake and low carbohydrate availability, which often happens in sport because women, one, are afraid of carbohydrates because of how they've been demonized, and two, aren't eating enough for the training that they're doing. That also presents as a lot of endocrine dysfunction, and it's another step towards relative energy deficiency in sport. So the more that we can take a stand and eat appropriately for the training and recover, including sleep and taking care of the emotional and physical stress around us, the more we can stay out of that next step into relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's not just a female issue. We're seeing it come up more and more in men as well, especially if we have more aesthetically oriented sports, which of course hybrid training and hybrid athletes tend to fall into that. But it's more dire for women because we're more sensitive from a brain standpoint and appetite regulation standpoint to low food and low carbohydrate intake.
Mm.
Yeah.
So interesting. And yeah, it's the diet culture, isn't it? And like the 90s and everyone saying,
Yeah.
you know,
The
don't eat
fat burning.
carbohydrates. Yeah,
Yeah.
or the Atkins diet, everything like that. And it
Yeah.
seems like, especially for females, we're very targeted into the diet culture, and people are, yeah, be lighter to be a faster runner as well. I think a lot of people think the lighter they get, the better athlete they'll be.
Yeah, that's a hard one because it works to a point, and I say that like it works to a point in the top pointy end 1%, as long as they've done it smartly, where they've worked over a long period of time to lose a bit of weight and their weight comes up in the off season. So it doesn't stay low. So you have cyclical changes in your weight to stay healthy. That's when we look at how lower body weight improves running performance. But for people who are just calorie restrictive and trying to drop their weight, their performance does not improve because they have so many other shutdown effects and reduced recovery effect and lack of adaptation. So they might say, "Oh, I'm 20 seconds faster in my 1K time." Yes, for one 1K rep, but how is that going to be sustainable in 2 weeks' time, or if you're doing 1K reps? And that's what people don't think about.
Yeah, I think it is important I guess the length of time these things like one take to recover from and two take to happen, you know, like a small amount of under eating but for a long period of time is like gonna have this negative effect. But I think maybe sometimes people don't realize it because they think it's not very much, or like, oh, but I am, like, I don't know, I feel good and I'm dropping the weight, but it's the length of time that it goes on for that I guess really affects you, because it just is like a domino effect, isn't it? Like,
Absolutely. So working with a lot of my professional athletes, I want them to go into their race season heavier than what they think they should be. Because when you start getting into a race season, be it Hyrox or cycling or whatever it is, if you have more weight at the start, you're more robust and you're going to get fitter as you're racing and you're going to lose weight as you are racing just by the nature of the whole season and everything that you have to do to get there. But if you start heavier, then you don't get sick, you don't get injured. You have reserves. And I'm not saying start 5 kilos heavier than your ideal, but if you're like a couple of kilos heavier than what you think you should be, that's ultimate gold. Because now you have a buffer that you can afford to lose as you're going, and it's going to be body fat, it's not going to be lean mass. And you're not going to end up with bone stress reactions, which can lead into stress fractures and other bone issues. And you're going to also have the availability to see if you're losing too much as you go through, because you're going to start to feel less recovered. You're going to start to see menstrual cycle irregularities or disturbances, and you might end up picking up more upper respiratory tract infections and colds even in the summer. So that's why I'm like, everyone start a little bit heavier than what your ideal is if you're going to be doing a longer season or more than one event. And even if it's your first event or you're only doing one event, ideally we want you to be a little bit heavier than what your ideal in your head weight is, because when you are training so hard, you reach a set point, and that's the ideal weight for you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And you touched on creatine and people blaming creatine, but
Yeah.
I know you're a big fan of creatine, and I feel like creatine actually has come to the fore, and in the hybrid space is actually everyone's quite positive around the benefits of taking creatine, and especially females. Is there any creatine in itself, the benefits of it for female athletes, but and females in general, but also is there any other supplements you would recommend for females to take?
Uh, we look from more of a foundational standpoint, what are we trying to support? We're trying to support cellular integrity and anti-inflammatory properties. So we want to look at a really good omega-3 because it just kind of boosts all the anti-inflammatory properties that your body naturally does and helps with our cell and cell walls. We think about vitamin D3, even though you guys are up northern hemisphere hitting hot 35 degrees, you've had a long period of darkness over winter, the same like, and we see vitamin D3 is so important for every system of the body, especially for muscle and bone. So those two with creatine are the main three I really try to push on women. And it doesn't matter how old you are, these are three really good ones as kind of foundational. Then we can also look at iron and calcium depending on your needs. Are you someone who is more ectomorphic, so thinner bones, not able to put on as much muscle mass? You're probably going to be going through a lot more calcium stores. So let's boost the calcium intake. If we're looking at iron, we see that with running, you have a higher incidence of iron deficiency, not necessarily anemia, but iron deficiency or low ferritin stores. And unfortunately, now when you go get your iron tested, you're being compared against the whole population. And we know that the general population has gotten sicker. So 3 or 4 years ago, you would go in and get your ferritin tested and it would be below 50. And they're like, whoa, you need to supplement or we need to do an infusion. Now it's 20. And if you are a hybrid athlete or a runner or anybody else who's sitting with a ferritin at 20, you're going to feel like shit. So you need to really look at how am I supplementing my iron if I need to. But if you don't need to supplement iron, don't do it because over absorption of iron presents just the same as iron deficiency, where you feel really flat and tired. So it is something that you need to get tested for to see when and if you really need it.
Okay, yeah. And if somebody was taking an iron supplement, would you say like liquid or tablet form, or what form is the best readily available?
We look at iron biglycinate or carbonyl iron, and these are the two most bioavailable, and you want to take it every other day, preferably first thing in the morning if you're training, because that's when the enzyme that inhibits iron absorption is lowest and you haven't been training yet. Once you start training, you come back, you have greater inflammation from training, and that stays elevated for quite a few hours post-training. And if any kind of inflammation occurs, then it increases the amount of hepcidin, which is the enzyme hormone that reduces iron absorption. So take it first thing in the morning so that you're insured to absorb it every other day.
And with vitamin C, is it better to take it with vitamin C or
Yeah, not a vitamin C tablet, but taking it
like
with a
orange
food
juice?
source.
Or
Yeah,
yeah.
kiwi fruit,
Yeah.
strawberries, all of those things. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, so just to touch on creatine, because I feel like it's such a controversial topic sometimes. The benefits for females, and especially like as females get older, creatine.
Yeah. We have around 70% of the stores that men do, primarily because women tend to eat less and not as much creatine containing foods, if we're thinking about all the animal products. But we see that it's involved in all the fast energetics. So it's brain health, health, muscle contraction, part of the muscle health, bone, intestines, everything in your body requires creatine if we're thinking about the 0 to 20 seconds of energetics that occur. We also are looking at using creatine for mood and under times of immense fatigue. If you're looking at using creatine 5 grams twice a day, it improves mood and you're able to function under fatigue states. So it's really important for brain and brain energetics. So when we're looking for women, we really try to emphasize it's not just about muscle performance. In the sports space, that's great. That's what we're after. But if we're looking at creatine as a general supplement, not the high doses, but we're looking at the 4 times a day, 5 grams with carbohydrate, which is the old bodybuilding idea. If we're just looking at a low, consistent dose, it boosts all the tissues in our body to be able to be more stress resilient, which is really important when we're thinking about today's whole global climate.
Yeah, totally. And that's the point, isn't it? Like the consistency of taking it you have to be consistent with taking creatine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what time of day you take it or how you take it. It's just being consistent that you do take it. It takes about 3 weeks for your body to be fully saturated. So if you're looking at 5 grams once a day, it takes about 3 weeks to get full saturation. You'll feel the benefits within a week or so, week to 10 days, but optimal is up to 3 weeks of consistent taking. Ideally, you just hold status quo from there, but you can start looking at doing some different loading patterns if you have a heavy training block coming up, just to support muscle performance and recovery. If you're doing a lot of transmeriting and travel, which you guys did over the Christmas period, right? And jet lag really hits and you're tired and trying to function, boosting creatine intake at those times really does help with cognition and reaction. So,
I definitely
yeah.
need that. I need that right now, to be honest. We just like everyone that's just come back from Chicago from like the world champs. I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah. And like, honestly, you've just said that. I feel like I've been having
Brain
mind,
fog.
brain fog, and just like
Yeah.
forgetting what I'm about to say. It's like that red S. I was like, I can't even remember what it stands for now. Total just
Right.
like brain fog.
I had the worst experience a few weeks ago when I went from New Zealand to California, but ended up in Truckee, which is at altitude. So jet lag at altitude, it
Oh,
was awful. Coming from sea level surf town to altitude is bad enough, but I was like, why am I struggling so much with jet lag? And then I realized that I was at 2,500 meters, and I was like, oh, that's why.
yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah,
Like, where's my
absolutely.
creatine? I need it.
Um,
Yeah.
and then before we touch on like menstrual cycle, if that's okay, and training around it, which is probably the biggest topic, but I know we could maybe try and do a bit of an overview for the females listening. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned then we spoke about like iron and the best time to take it, and creatine can be any day. For females, generally for fueling, like around their training, could you just overview like the best times to eat to help like recovery and to help fuel training? Because I think it's slightly different for females to males.
Yeah, so a lot of 5 a.m. club members, if that makes sense. And they're like, I don't want to get up and eat a full meal. What do I have? It's like, well, that's why the protein coffee went viral, because it's really easy to do, right? Half a banana with a little bit of yogurt, nothing. It doesn't have to be a full meal if you're that early, but you do want to have some protein and carb before you go training. After training, we see that women's blood glucose comes back down to normal within 45 to 60 minutes. So that means that you've effectively come back down to baseline. But that doesn't mean that your hormones have settled. Your brain is still like, I need some food. Blood glucose has come back down because we don't use it the same as men. So there's a different regulatory mechanism post-exercise, but we still have an elevation in our catabolic hormones. So we need to eat some protein and some carbohydrate pretty soon, within an hour, preferably no longer than an hour after exercise, so that we can shut down that breakdown state. Because if we don't, then the brain perceives us as being in that low energy state, which can feed forward to complications that we talked about with low energy availability and red S. When we talk about protein intake, I know there's been a lot of chatter that there's really no sex difference in protein intake post-exercise. The caveat there is we're not looking to just potentiate muscle recovery. We're looking to stimulate hypothalamus going, oh, amino acids, let's stop that breakdown state. So that's why it's really important to go, okay, I've had my morning session. I need to have real breakfast pretty soon after. Or, I'm going straight from the gym to work and I'm not going to get to work for another hour or so. What am I going to have in my bag that's going to be transient enough? So this is where we're looking at a flask of overnight oats that, you don't really have to refrigerate because it's pretty viable for a couple of hours outside. Or if we're in a real kind of pinch, then we're going with a protein recovery drink that also has carbohydrate in it. And then when you get to work, you can have the rest of your real meal. And so we look at, really trying to see how many training sessions we have in a day. If we have one really big one, fueling really well in and around that session. If we have two, we know that if you don't refuel well after the first one, the second one suffers because your liver muscle glycogen isn't topped up enough. So you might be able to get through the second session, but it's not optimal with the training stress or the subsequent adaptation. So eating as much as you have eating opportunities, but really be cognizant of how you are fueling in and around your training.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's great. That definitely helps cover that. Yeah, just the importance of it as well. It really is. So thank you.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, Faye, did you want to ask anything else on that, or can I ask about training around menstrual cycle? Or
Go for it.
yeah, just for females, is it the best thing to track and adapt training to your menstrual cycle, or just be aware of it so that you know how you're feeling and listen to your body? Or what would your advice be around it?
So if you were to ask me this question 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said, let's definitely look at phase-based training. From a molecular standpoint, we see that low estrogen, low progesterone is really beneficial for high intensity and stress resilience. And then after ovulation, we have the elevation of estrogen and progesterone. We see quite a bit of metabolic and thermoregulatory shifts. The caveat there is ovulation, because we don't know if you ovulate or not. We're seeing a higher incidence of anovulatory cycles, especially in active women. And like I said earlier, you can't tell that you ovulated or not because you'll still have a bleed. There's changes in the bleed pattern. So when we're looking at it, the best thing to optimize your training is definitely to track your cycle and track how you feel against it, because then you're going to start to see your own patterns of when you feel bulletproof and when you kind of not so great. So you can schedule your harder sessions in on the days where you feel bulletproof to really maximize training stress and recovery from that stress. Then on the days you don't feel that fantastic, that's when you're putting more mobility and technique if you really feel like you have to have a session. Otherwise, it's more active recovery or a rest day. And that's how you're going to be able to mitigate the training load and recovery and improve your adaptive response across the menstrual cycle. If you're someone who's really into biohacking and want to know, if I ovulated, then I can make these changes, there's some really cool apps and companies out there now that use urine dipsticks as well as temperature and tracking to look at urine metabolites for progesterone. So one is Prove, Proov, and the other is UVA, OOUVA. And they're companies that have been working on these devices for a very long period of time and have really robust science behind the urine metabolites. So that's one way if you're really into biohacking. But for the most part, if you're tracking and you're also looking at sleep and sleep metrics over it, then that gives you the best data for yourself to be able to train according to your menstrual cycle.
Yeah. And then
it's
no, go on.
no go.
I was gonna ask, is there something with like the elevated temperature at a certain time in your
Yeah.
that then makes training feel a lot harder
Harder?
yeah, like, because I mean, we went to New Zealand and the race felt harder because it was so hot. So I'm just thinking like a lot of women get the elevated skin temperature or feel like hot flushes, that sort of thing. Does that then impact your training?
So if we look, progesterone is a driver of your temperature. It increases your temperature. It also decreases your heart rate variability. By the nature of increasing your resting heart rate, increases your respiratory rate. Everything feels a little bit harder when progesterone is up there. The way that we can mitigate it is carbohydrate. We bring in more carbohydrate because progesterone's job is to take all the building blocks of material of your amino acids and your glucose and all of your carbohydrate that's coming in to build a very beautiful, lush endometrial lining for an implanted egg. So you're going to feel like, this feels really hard. By increasing protein, because we see progesterone increases your needs by about 12% on average, and it also really pulls carbohydrate away from muscle availability. So just bookending your training with a little bit more carb and drinking something cold I like to drink cold vital aminos or something like that in the high hormone phase, because then I'm getting a little bit more amino acid on board, which helps kind of reduce the amount that my body's relying on from breaking down muscle tissue. And the cold helps with the temperature control. So if you're drinking something cold with more carbohydrate around your training, it really does attenuate that feeling of, ugh, I can't get through this session. So
Yeah.
next time you come to New Zealand in the summertime,
Yeah.
do some heat adaptation first by getting into the sauna for like
Yeah.
5 to 10 days beforehand. Then you come over.
Yeah. I mean, and like, yeah, Auckland was brutal. That race was just,
Yeah, that was a
we
shock
were
for us.
suffering. I mean, I
Yeah.
did hear a couple of Aussies go, "Oh, this is hot," and I was like, "You think it's hot? We've just come from Scotland." But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Winter.
yeah, exactly. And then I know we're gonna round up soon, but like, we have a lot of mums that and mothers that one are in the elite 15 and just absolutely killing it in races, and I think like there's so many in Hyrox in general. Is there anything that anyone, if they've just had a baby, they're getting back into training, or yeah, mums that like obviously they've gone through so much with their body, anything that they might be able to do like training wise, like nutrition, supplement wise, to help them? Because obviously I just like the female bodies are just incredible, and you just even just looking at the competitors and thinking what females have had to go through compared to the men's side, when the guys are the same every day for their whole life.
I know.
I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
bitter.
That's why I have
But yeah,
a
is there
small,
any? Yeah.
yeah. So I have a small chuckle every time I see a guy walking up our big hill with a weight vest versus the women who go up every day with the babies who are all like wiggly on the front. I'm like, yeah, take a baby, it's harder, but they won't. Yeah, so when we're talking about like women coming back after having a kid, very, very first thing is pelvic floor. Like really important to get pelvic floor control back. Working with a physio or working with my friend's company is called the Buff Muff, which I laugh about, but
Brilliant.
on purpose. But it's an app that tells you how to go through and gain control, especially postpartum. Really important, because you can't go in and start lifting heavy if you don't have pelvic floor control, because it just doesn't work very well. You want to learn how to sync the muscles. After 6 weeks, generally women will be given the okay to go back to training, but there's a difference if you've had a vaginal delivery, because now your sits bones have been widened, your biomechanics are off. So you'll want to get a running assessment done. If you don't get a running assessment, or you can't find someone to do a running assessment, you can have someone film you with their phone camera, and then you can look at the angles of your hips and your knees. You might need to invest in different running shoes because your mechanics are a bit off. And you also have to think about doing a lot of accessory exercise to rebuild the strength of the tendons and the ligaments around the joints, because they've gone through a lot of laxicity. Physicians won't tell you this stuff. Physios can, but they're really focused on just pelvic floor or mitigating some kind of running injury without looking at the whole picture. So those are two of the biggest things that new moms need to be very conscious of: the biomechanical changes that happen. Even with a C-section, you'll still have some biomechanical changes from holding the baby, and then the recovery aspect of having the muscles cut. So it is really good to get some kind of biomechanical assessment if you're going to start getting more into rud and loading patterns, and pelvic floor. Like I said, those are the two big things. Gradually increasing your load because you've had 10 months of a change in your body and your loading patterns. So know that it's like a major injury. It takes some time to come back out. Although we'll see elite athletes who are hitting the ground and killing it with 6 weeks postpartum, that's not the norm.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we tend to forget that those people who do that are on the very edges of the bell curve, but most of us are in the middle. So take your time. Use your first race back as just getting back into the whole environment of it and not trying to be overly competitive if it's a short amount of time. And then look to kill it after that, because you have a boost in blood volume and pain resilience and stress resilience, and you learn how to be very mindful of time management on short sleep and baby schedules. So yeah, it all comes into playing as a better athlete about 6 months after you've given birth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
You
so
can
true
definitely see
because
that.
it's the mindset and the like pain threshold is just unbelievable when you see like what people can achieve, and mothers after having kids seem to come back stronger for sure.
Yeah, and I think part of it also is their training changes because they don't have the luxury of time after they have a kid. So now they're like, okay, what's the most effective bang for my buck? So we see a lot of changes in the training and the mentality around training, which means they're actually optimizing their training and recovery. Can't say that sleep deprivation from a new baby is optimal for recovery, but
Yeah.
it does allow people to go, oh, wait, I'm too tired, so I'm going to do more mobility rather than I'm too tired, I'm going to try to slam it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the sessions become more focused and more purpose driven because you've got that
Yep,
time, you found that time, it's for you, and you're going to hit what you need to hit because you've got,
exactly.
that 40 minutes or something. Yeah, no,
Yep.
that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Ah,
creatine. You can use
and
creatine while
creatine.
breastfeeding. Yes. Yeah.
Definitely. Um, was there any other questions you wanted to, I mean, I think we could like chat
We
for
could go on
hours
forever.
and ask you so many questions, but did you have anything else, Faye, that you had?
No, I think like to be honest, we've talked around everything, and I think for anyone listening, if they haven't heard of Stacy, like you've got books, you've got newsletters, you've done like an incredible TED talk, you've got courses. There's so much information out there, and you talk on such a broad, varied, scale of females in sport and females just generally in female physiology. That I think probably if you've enjoyed this podcast and you've started to listen to everything Stacey's got to say, if you want more, there's there's more
There's a
out
lot
there.
more.
There's so much available that we don't have to cover everything right now.
That because I'm passionate about making every woman educated so that they can make really cool choices for themselves. So that's why there's so much of my blabbing around out there because
No,
that's
it's
my passion.
yeah, we love it. We love it. Is there, before I ask you our closing question, is there anything else that you feel would be appropriate to share with our listeners for Hyrox training, the Hyrox world, or do you think we've done quite a good job at trying to cover it all?
I think we've done a really good job.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
I think we've
Yeah.
done well. So,
Yeah.
well, I will then ask you the last question that we want to finish up each episode with, which is what message or advice would you give to your younger self or the next generation of girls coming up?
Two things. One is always ask why, because if you just kind of follow along and get guided by certain things and don't ask why, then often misleaded. And this also goes for like adventures and making decisions, like ask why, is it appropriate for me? And the other is to take up space and to be strong. Like, don't be pushed if you're even walking on the sidewalk and there are three people coming towards you, don't move over. Like, take up your own space, be confident in yourself, and be empowered in that confidence. Because I get really tired of seeing women who can just kill it in the gym and have so much confidence, and then they get out in the real world and all of a sudden they're demure and quiet again. It's like, no, take that empowerment from the gym and take that empowerment from the support you get from your friends and bring it into your normal life. Because that's how every woman should be. They should feel confident in themselves and be confident in their choices.
Yeah, I love that. It's
Yeah.
so true as well. It is. Wow. Stacey, where
But you
can
have to walk out of
everybody?
there and walk out tall. You're like,
Yeah,
yep,
exactly. It is, and I mean, that's part of why we wanted to tailor our podcast. Like we've and everything we do in our business, because like we've been working on it, and the podcast has been great in the last year. But I think we just need to do more to empower females and shout about females and the great stuff they're doing. And I mean, you're doing an incredible job, and like I actually can't believe we managed to get you on the podcast. It still blows my mind that I'm sitting here speaking to you, because we've been following you for so long. We've done your courses, we've listened to everything and read everything, your newsletters. But for anybody that isn't a super fan like us two, where could can they find you? Where's the best place for them to start?
I guess, I mean, I'm on social media, of course, Insta, TikTok, and for old school Facebook as Dr. Stacy Sims. But our website has a lot of information. So it's drstacysims.com. That's where you can sign up for the newsletter. You can see the courses, you see all the stuff that I'm up to, research projects, collabs, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Perfect. And your TED Talk, Women Are Not Small Men. I mean, the title of that is just sums up everything,
Oh,
really,
thanks.
doesn't it? And that's such a good. It's a great like snippet to watch, to see like everything you've done.
All the stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thanks. Thanks.
But yeah, I think well, good luck for Melbourne. It's December,
Yes.
is it? The
Yeah.
Hyrox?
Are you guys coming down?
I
Next
don't
time
think
you
we'll be
come,
down. I don't know.
well,
I don't think we'll be in
next time you
Australia
come
this
down.
year, but you never know. You never know. We like to
Okay.
like get around. We do like to get around.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah, we'll
I wish
definitely
I'd
be
known you were
following.
here in February. Then I would have
Oh
like
no.
could have had this
Devastated.
conversation live.
Oh
Yeah, we
no.
could have done this in person. I know. I honestly think did you see it on social media, Faye?
Yeah,
After
like
you
straight
were
away
like,
after, and I don't know how I missed it before. I was like,
how
oh
did
my
I
God,
not
I'm
know?
devastated.
Like Stacy was on the rower and we were like just in the arena. How did we not know this? So yeah, you never know. We might be in Melbourne.
Wow. Just hanging out with everyone else, trying to just get through it.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
miss
No, we'll
Alan.
definitely meet up at Hyrox very soon, I am sure. I feel like it's
Good.
it's definitely gonna happen.
Yeah, it will. It will. It's a small community in the bigger scheme of things that we will see each other live, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for listening. We will see you next week.
That's great. Thanks.